Some of the most important events in human history occurred on a battlefield, conflicts which drove massive change throughout the world. It seems like part of human nature to group up together and engage in mass violence to get our way. But what if I told you that the current archaeological evidence suggests that warfare and organized violence could be a relatively new thing? In this video, I want to cover multiple topics, such as the possible origin of warfare and how it evolved technologically and strategically over time. More importantly, I want to dive into the possible reasons these ancient people raised swords and spears against each other, leading to a period more violent than anything else in prehistory before. But before that, we need to go back to a time very long ago, a time long before civilization, agriculture, trade, and even the bow and arrow. We need to go back to the early Stone Age. Despite the lack of evidence, some of the first instances of organized violence likely occurred hundreds of thousands of years ago. There is no evidence for this, but it would be foolish to not consider that it might have happened in extremely rare circumstances. Anthropologists believe that this lack of warfare and organized violence 400,000 to 12,000 years ago was largely due to our ancestors' way of life. These early humans lived a humble hunter-gatherer way of life. They hunted game, they gathered edible plants, they fished in lakes and rivers, and most importantly, they roamed. Unlike farming, this hunter-gatherer way of life required an enormous amount of land per person to survive, making it impossible to stay in one place for an extended period of time. Any accumulation of wealth, such as furs, tools, string, and food, was difficult, as all of it would have to be carried from place to place. Also, the population at the time was extremely low, and contact between tribes was very unlikely. For exactly those two reasons, conflict was likely extremely rare in this Paleolithic and Mesolithic period. This goes for human to Neanderthal conflict also. There was simply no benefit, no occasion, and even if an occasion occurred, the mobile nature of life at the time assured that one side could easily escape. It is in the early Neolithic period, around 12,000 years ago, that we first start seeing clear evidence for organized violence. Rarely, but still a significant increase over the Mesolithic and Paleolithic period. 10,000 BC was a period of massive change as humans began to settle down in one place and began to grow their own food. A time in our prehistory often called the agricultural revolution. This shift from hunting and gathering to farming was a gradual process which occurred over thousands of years. As agriculture became the norm, instances of mass violence and then warfare began to occur. While this could technically be a coincidence, anthropologists believe that this could be due to a fundamental change in how much wealth one group of people could generate and how easily that wealth could be taken by others. Also, on a much smaller scale, disputes over fertile land ownership within settlements was likely a major concern. Either way, both likely resulted in organized violence and later, as you will learn, even warfare. Just think about this, how much wealth could a really gifted Stone Age hunter accumulate? How much food could he, as the most experienced hunter, bring each day to share with others? On a good day, maybe he and his fellow tribesmen could bring a huge animal like an elk, which could feed around 5 people for a couple of days, and on another day they might bring nothing. A gifted farmer and animal herder, on the other hand, with some help from his immediate family, could grow crops, claim huge stretches of land, and expand his cattle herd to sizes which could feed an excess of hundreds of people. Such an individual, as the head of his household or his descendants, could support multiple families, have many wives, more than 10 or even 20 sons and daughters, forming as a result a powerful family with enormous influence over surrounding regions. This wealth upon death would then be passed down, further compounding this never-before-seen wealth gap. The social, economic and reproductive gap that likely formed during this period is believed to be one of the primary factors for why groups of people might have turned against each other and engaged in violence and theft. Also, obviously, some groups of people must have inevitably realized that going around and pillaging completely unprepared villages was perhaps a much easier job than farming. A job often considered to be one of the hardest, especially before all the modern inventions that make it look easy today. So far I found this theory to be the most convincing, but obviously it's prehistory we're talking about. There is plenty of evidence suggesting these organized conflicts occurred, but we might never truly know why they occurred. Speculation in this field, however, is quite logical and based on circumstantial evidence and cumulative knowledge of many experts from a variety of fields. The origin of warfare in comparison to just organized violence is believed to be a simple one. As these wealthy early agricultural families began to see patterns of increased violence, I think we can be fairly certain that eventually some of them began to form their very own armies. We know due to archaeological evidence that they fortified. Some settlements like Uruk and Jericho, for example, began to build high walls and groundwork fortifications, so we can be quite certain that they must have had some sort of militia too. And again, I think it's not hard to imagine one with such power to eventually abuse it. It is much easier to maintain such an army if tributes can be demanded from nearby settlements. There must have been multiple such families expanding their reach, eventually overlapping their influence over one village. Disputes over such matters were probably not peaceful, ending up with two powerful sides with well-funded military might clashing against each other, causing bloodshed that has never been seen anywhere else in prehistory before. This is no exaggeration. Out of all remains found during this period 7,000 years ago, almost 12% of individuals, mostly men, suffered from lethal weapon damage before their death. Many of the weapons that were used during this period, and we should remember that this is still the Stone Age, were simple tools like stone axes, hammers, knives, sometimes spears, slings, as well as the bow and arrow. This is a time where some of the first instances of warfare occurred. The concept of state and government was still in its infancy at the time. So specialized war equipment such as halberds, shields, armor, long spears, as well as cavalry units did not exist yet. This must have been a time of great opportunity for some of these wealthy farming families to form some of the first cities, armies, as well as governments, being responsible for sparking some of the first civilizations such as ancient Egypt, Sumeria, and many others that we still remember to this day. It is during the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, that we begin to see an emergence of militarized society where warriors were quite likely idolized. This is evidenced by countless burials around this period in which warriors were treated like heroes, buried with very fine crafts, ornamental weapons, precious metals, and later also swords. They were also often presented with the utmost respect in art, whether it's rock art or palace frescoes. Overall, warfare and organized conflict around this period was common and widespread, but now, at least compared to the early Neolithic, it was mostly warriors who suffered in battle, not the peasants. Most land, especially around the Levant, where civilization was most advanced, was already occupied, settlements protected by one state or the other. Some of the popular civilizations that were already on the rise during this period were Sumeria, ancient Egypt, Babylonia, and the Hittites. The existence of bronze changed everything, as the most important non-edible commodity any state or government entity at the time would make year-to-year trade agreements to have bronze processed and delivered. With the increased reliance on trade, merchants would be granted safe passage and protection privileges. Alliances were also likely made through marrying off highborn daughters to important men in nearby states, governments, and empires. With all this political complexity, especially reliance on trade, the occurrence of warfare and organized conflict decreased but was still common. When warfare did occur, however, it was likely strategic raids to disrupt bronze supply, pillaging of smaller settlements to disrupt economy, as well as siege. Armies were now well equipped and strategically optimized. The importance of archery and bladed weapons in warfare is evidenced through many archaeological findings, mostly graves in the Bronze Age Italy. Maces, axes, swords, archers, chariots of war, and even spearmen formations were already common in warfare by 2000 BC. This was when prehistory was about to end and history with the invention of writing would take over, and that's a story for another time. Overall, the study of warfare and organized violence is an important field which could explain if life before state and government really was savage and brutish. So far, the evidence shows otherwise. The early Neolithic people and the hunter-gatherer tribes lived mostly peaceful lives. In the end, however, it is prehistory we're talking about, and there is simply not enough evidence to be sure. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, I hope you leave with this baseline understanding of early conflict and its possible connection to government and wealth.